Thank you for joining Space Store on this panel discussion this afternoon. Very much appreciate you taking time to join us and listen in and participate in the conversation today, which is, the topic today is the future workplace as a hybrid experience. And we're going to, I'll explain a little bit around the background to that question in a second or two. But first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Alex Harvey and I'm VP of Sales with Space Store. And the global perspective and the clients that we work with on a global basis is very much what drives me in these insight sessions, in understanding what are the challenges that our clients are facing, because I think everyone's trying to figure out a lot of very, very similar issues and challenges. So bringing together insights from the workplace interiors industry, bringing together industry leaders and thinkers is very valuable in helping us to discuss and uncover solutions. So we'd love to welcome our panelists. We're going to be introducing them shortly, and we certainly want to thank them for joining us today. So first of all, perhaps if the panelists could briefly give a bit of a background to your role and the perspectives and insights you're bringing to us today. So Thomas Jensen, you could introduce yourself. Thomas is Director of Design with OTJ Architects in New York City.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. My name is Thomas Jensen. I'm the Design Director for OTJ Architects in New York City. So OTJ Architects is a mid-sized architecture firm with 6 locations across the United States. And we really specialize in workplace interiors, and we have clients such as Capital One, JP Morgan Chase, Booz Allen Hamilton, and PayPal. So we care deeply about the modern office. I've been doing offices since the last financial crisis, so since 2008. So it's really been my passion, and I think it's really where a lot of very interesting design trends sort of take root first.
Fantastic, thanks Thomas, and great to have you with us today. And then also we have Karen McCallum, who's the Senior Director of Design with Cbre, based in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes, thank you, Alex. I'm really excited to be here today as well. So like you said, I lead the Atlanta Design Studio for Cbre. Cbre's design practice is made up of over 340 design and engineering professionals globally. And something that I really love about what we're doing is that we're using our own company and our own offices as a living lab to test workplace strategies and implement best practices. We're designing forward-thinking spaces that bring people together and really create better places to work and play. My primary focus is on workplace design, but I do have a strong background in higher education, hospitality, and healthcare design. And I really bring what I've learned from those project types into how I'm thinking about future workplace design. So I'm excited to be here and talk about the hybrid workplace.
Great, thanks Karen, we're excited to have you. Love to hear your insights. And we have Peggie Rothe with us today as well, who's the Chief Insights and Research Officer with the Leesman Index.
Hello everyone, and thanks Alex for having me on the panel. So as mentioned, I'm Chief Insights and Research Officer at Leesman, and for those of you who are not familiar with Leesman, essentially we're on a mission to make places that work better. And the way we do that is we offer a completely standardized and independent measure of the employee workplace experience. So being independent, that means that we actually don't offer any other services. So we're not consultants, we're not designers, we're not change managers or project managers. We leave that to the other experts. And instead we simply focus on doing a completely standardized and independent measure of how good a workplace is. And the way we do that is with standardized surveys. So we have our core product, which focuses on how good a workplace is. We've collected nearly 800,000 responses to that survey to date. And then now, as we're in the situation we're all in globally, we've ventured into looking at the home working experience. So in April, we launched our home working experience survey that looks at naturally how people are experiencing the home as a workplace, and now we're up to over 100,000 respondents on that survey as well. So my role within Leesman is that I lead the team that basically looks after our data, makes sure that our clients who run their surveys get insights and visualizations of their results that help them make decisions. And then on the other hand, my team also crunches the numbers and shares insights from the data more generally. So my approach today is I'm speaking partly with a passion around employee experience, and on the other hand also I think my viewpoints are very much grounded in data. So great to be here today.
Great, thanks Peggy, and we're excited to hear what the data is telling you in a minute or two. And then finally we have Russell Kingston, Managing Director of the Space Store US Division.
Thanks, Alex. And yeah, you've said what I do. And likewise, as you said, and it's been really interesting over the past months, all the different people we've been engaging with globally, the different organizations we've been working with, and starting to see that picture emerge and see what's actually transpiring in terms of how people are thinking this hybrid and workplace might work out as we go forward. Like Peggy, I love the data. I love actually drilling down into what people are actually thinking, what the experience is actually like. So very excited to discuss this in more detail today.
Good, thanks Russell. And if you only just joined us, thanks again for joining Space Store on this Insights live discussion. We'd love to invite participation also from anyone who's joined in the audience. You've got the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So we've already had a number of questions that are emailed in, but we'd love for you to join the conversation. We'd love you to hear from you around the questions that are in your mind around the whole topic of the future of the workplace. And also we'd love to hear from you with any future topics that you'd like to discuss in this Insights Live forum. So let's get into today's subject, which is the future workplace as a hybrid experience. And just a bit of background to kind of frame the question. I think we will recognise that broadly the working from home experiment, as I call it, has basically worked. Effectively, most people have been able to do most of their job okay. Everyone's had a slightly different experience, but broadly it's worked. And we're definitely seeing that every region globally is at a slightly different stage, either emerging from lockdown. There's obviously some local numbers fluctuating. But we've heard a lot of debate and discussion around the office and what the future of the office is post-COVID, or even some extreme views, does the office even have a future? One thing that's just been preying on my mind a little bit is that the whole reason for the office as we see it today, the evolution of the office to where we are today, was very largely driven by the value of some of those unplanned, serendipitous face-to-face interactions, the conversations between people that maybe you don't work with on a day-to-day basis, maybe other teams or other silos in the organization. And for suddenly us to be hearing that people are saying the office no longer has a part to play, you know, everyone can work from home, has it really completely disappeared, the need for those face-to-face interactions, the kind of very public U-turns we've seen with some major client organizations? Has the office really changed that dramatically in the space of 3 months? So what I'd like to do is really discuss that, and the subject around the hybrid experience is really a blend of the work from the office and also work from home, and whether are they actually competitors, or are they actually part of the same solution for everybody, depending on your work, depending on the type of personality type you are. Does everyone actually need to look at a combined solution? So I wonder, Peggy, if you could kick off first with just some of the insights to the data that you're seeing. Fascinated to hear about the work from home data that you've got at your fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I mean, what we've seen in our data, the responses to the home working survey is, as you mentioned, that generally the experience has been pretty good among the global workforce. We're seeing good experience scores, and yeah, generally people are perceiving many of the activities to be very well supported at home. But I think there's a few buts in there. One, first of all, is that even though the average experience is good, it doesn't mean that it's good for everyone. So we see that about 20% of the employees are actually reporting quite frankly, a quite poor experience from working from home. Second of all, we're seeing quite large differences between organizations. So in some organizations, the overall experience is good, while other organizations generally actually don't have an overall good experience. And naturally also we're seeing certain things that are better supported now at home, but then, as you, for example, mentioned, the informal social interaction and feeling connected to your colleagues and feeling connected to the organization, those are the sort of things that certainly have been a challenge now that that people have been working from home. And then further on as well, we're seeing different demographic groups that are perhaps having more challenges or bigger challenges than others. So, for example, younger employees who typically, when we look at the workplace experience, so look at the office experience, they tend to have the best experience of the office environment and find that the office supports them the best. And the older you get, the more responsibility, the higher your requirements, the poorer your experience of the office. But when we look at the home working experience, it's actually the reverse. So the younger employees are the ones who are reporting some poorer scores and poorer experiences compared to the older employees. And now I can go on for an hour with insights from the data, so I might just stop there and leave room for comments and questions and further remarks.
Fantastic, yeah, good, thanks Peggy, and very, very interesting insights. I'll be interested to draw Karen and Thomas in here and just to see some of the data that Peggy's just shared with us, see whether that's something you're seeing reflected either within your own organisation or within the clients that you work with. Perhaps you first, Karen.
Yeah, so, what we're starting to see is that, to Peggy's point, while working from home does work for some people, it doesn't work for everyone. So the office is still going to be there in the future. But I think when people get up in the morning and think about their day, they're really going to think about not just what they're doing at work that day, they're going to think about their personal day as well, right? And then they're going to be very prescriptive on how they plan out that day and what the reason is that they're going into the office. So we've been talking a lot about how the office really needs to be designed very thoughtfully so that it can support those right type of activities that need to happen now. And I don't think that just means collaboration. I think that individual heads down spaces are still going to be very important post-COVID. And so it's really focusing on, what is that right makeup of those spaces. And I think the workplace that supports activity-based working and is very flexible is going to be a more successful solution in the future. So thinking about free address and clean desking policies, thinking about, what is the open office turning into? What are those furniture solutions? And how can those furniture solutions work today, but then also be flexible enough to work a year from now or 2 years from now, depending upon what happens. And then I think one of the most important things that we need to think about and that we're talking to our clients about is enhancing those shared spaces, those collaboration spaces, but also the amenity spaces, because it's going to be really important to have something that brings people or encourages people to want to come into the office, to bring your organization together and to enhance that culture. Before COVID and what we're doing for Cbre and our other clients, we always talk about FOMO, right? The fear of missing out, and that you want the office to be designed in a way that people want to come in because it's dynamic and it's energetic and you feel like you're a part of something. So I think that's going to be really, really important post-COVID to get people back into the office so that you want to get up in the morning and get dressed and maybe get in your car and head in and have a day and be a part of the organization.
That's great. Thanks, Karen. And Thomas, how about any insights you can bring from the clients you're working with?
Yeah, I completely agree with what we've heard so far. I think, if anything, if we can take something positive from this experience, it is that we've added 2 whole new tools to our office kit. Like we have proven that working from home can be part of a normal work week. And we've proven that some kind of video conferencing, we can talk more about later what that actually entails, but some kind of remote working can also work. And I think that's huge. I think we have, there's no one solution that fits everyone. And I think a modern workplace is about flexibility and it's about inclusiveness. And we just got 2 extra arrows for our quiver in that regard. And I think that's what we should be focusing on, not focusing on eliminating options and saying we can only do this or we can only do this. We should say, yes, we can do all the things and we can do them better.
That's very interesting, because we've seen, I guess over the last good few years, we've seen an increased understanding that every person is an individual who has their own individual work style, maybe preferences, needs, and as you say, adding more options to the available choice. So really what you're, or maybe what I'm reading into what you're suggesting, is we've got an enhancement of activity-based working. We've actually extended the opportunities beyond the physical boundaries of the workplace.
Yeah, and if I can, sorry, just add to that. I think what we need to remember is that we can't unlearn this or undo this experience. As Thomas said, we've now seen that it can work for people, and you know, people globally have now had the chance to try home working, and they you know, a big part of them have actually enjoyed it and thought that there's some benefits in working from home. So I think organizations really are facing the choice of, do they want to have the approach of seeing the home as you said, the competitor to the office, where it's kind of either or, and that's where you start having the rhetoric. I saw an article yesterday that I think the title was something along the lines of, how do you choose who gets to work from home? And that kind of makes me almost cringe, because that makes that, it kind of takes the approach of it's either or, it's home versus the office. So you can take, by all means, you can take that approach, but on the other hand, there's also the other approach of seeing the home environment as perhaps the collaborator to the office, so that it complements the office environment. And I think that approach is where you're really kind of focusing or having the employee experience as the starting point, and you're, you know, you're focusing on giving people flexibility and choice, and maximizing their experience, rather than basically focusing on who gets the workplace or gets to work from home. And I think, to be honest, in that first approach, the either or approach, you're going to waste a lot of, or you're going to spend most of your resources and focus on trying to convince people that to come to the office, instead of actually taking the approach of giving the flexibility to them to choose what works best for them.
So do you think over the past few years we've seen a massive step forward in terms of the workplace experience and the effort that organisations and employers have been putting into it? Do you think that's going to go up a couple of bars now? Because there's important parts of the office, onboarding, building the culture, those serendipitous interactions, etc. But it's going to have to be something that people want to do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope we see that. I hope we see a development both in wanting to further improve the office environments, to make them places where people want to come in for certain activities and to socialize and so forth, and also to naturally, as Karen said, do some of their individual activities. But I do hope that organizations start looking at the workplace as a wider thing, as a collection of places where you can work, rather than just being the office or the home.
If I may, I think we were already heading in that direction. I think all the sort of the clients that were looking over the horizon a few years ago, that's what they were aiming for, an office where people wanted to come because it facilitated things that they couldn't do either the way the office currently looked or from the other places they were working. We've been doing a number of sort of experience centers or experimental workplaces, where it's really about setting things up so that however you choose to work that day, we can accommodate for that. So I think I was a little taken aback a couple of months ago when people were like, well, the modern office is dead. We've got to redo everything. No, we should redo the things we didn't redo in the last 10 years. There are some offices out there that are 20 years old that have a whole other range of issues. but I think the direction we were heading in was already accommodating what we're seeing now.
So like we've heard a lot, a pandemic or a major event like this accelerates some of the trends that are maybe already in progress, but it actually accelerates the progress of them. I'm just interested in a comment from, or a question from John Trocino, who's asking about organizational networks and how they're going to evolve and be impacted by the hybrid work experience. And I was just thinking, as we were talking earlier, so we've got the close connections we have with our work colleagues, those who are immediately in our team, where often, you know, even if we're distributed, we can still have the conversations we need to have, whether it's, you know, planned Zoom meetings or informal chats. And then you've got the informal connections between ourselves and maybe other teams that we're not directly involved with. But do you see technology playing a part in making sure that the right people are in the right place at the same time, you know, in kind of coordinating our calendars and diaries so that we can all be flexible and do the types of tasks we need to do when we want to, but also we can be bumping into the right people? Have you seen that, Karen, happening in any of your client organizations?
Well, yes. And I think technology, you know, technology was important and was something we talked about and how it gets integrated into the workplace pre-COVID. And technology became very, very important, right, when everybody had to work from home. So everybody was having to figure out immediately how to go virtual. And I will say I'm very proud of CBRE because we were very prepared, and the organization overall didn't miss a beat, and the design team and engineering team, we didn't miss a beat. We were able to work virtually. So, you know, the companies that had those pieces figured out were very, very fortunate. I think moving forward, technology really needs to continue to evolve, and I know people are working on that right now, on what these new technologies are that are going to help us post-COVID deal with some of the challenges that I think will start to arise, and really around thinking about the blended meeting experience. So when you have these meetings that are happening that are both physical and virtual, those we need to figure out how to make those more successful, right? This that we're doing right now is totally successful. Everyone's engaged, or we're all virtual. We know face-to-face meetings are successful because everybody's in the room together. So I think focusing on what those new technologies are is going to be very important, and then figuring out how those technologies influence the built space, and looking at how we can reinvent the meeting spaces and the collaboration spaces in the future office to all work together seamlessly, so that this new hybrid will be successful.
Yeah, as you said, the collaboration spaces are really important. Go ahead, Russell. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, just interesting, the questions coming from Jill Johnson. She's asking a question which I think is top of mind for many people thinking about their real estate plans right now, with businesses under pressure and people thinking about perhaps reducing their floor plates and their real estate needs because of the costs. How do we get that balance between making sure that we have enough office space and workspace for people when they do come in, yet we don't end up having too much, and get the balance right, because we're balancing physical at work and people working from home as we look forward into the future?
I would say that is a question we get. I think I get that probably at least once a week, if not every other day, on how much space do I need to take, or what is the right footprint for the future. And it's not, and we were just talking about this with Thomas and Peggy, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So I think it's going to be really important that data is used when working with clients, that we're gathering a lot of data and looking at their individual organization and how they work to come up with a curated solution for them and works for their organization. I think, you know, again, going back to like unassigned seating, I think that's going to be something that's going to help with less people coming into the office. But then I think you're going to probably need more meeting spaces, or a different variety of meeting spaces to make up for these virtual blended meetings that are happening. And so I don't think that the footprint is going to shrink. I think it's going to be taken back up with some other things. And I think the workstation, the individual workstation before, where we were really densifying the open office. We're going to start to de-densify that a little bit. So you'll have less seats, but then you have less people coming in, and you have a bit of a bigger footprint there. So I think it comes out as like a net wash at the end of the day.
It's interesting.
Yeah, if I may, I think that's what we're seeing also. We are, even in our own office, we are employing a lot of monitoring devices so we can see how spaces are actually used, so that it's not anecdotal, but we can actually, with anonymized data, we can see, all right, this room is simply not used enough for the function that we're giving it. I wanted to bring in one more thing though, which is that like 15 years ago when we were pushing hard for the open office, one of the reasons we could do it was that the phones had gone quiet. Everyone had switched from the 10, 15, 20, however many phone calls a day to emails. So we had a much more quiet work environment. Now that half of our team potentially is working remotely, this video conferencing, whatever form that takes, is going to bring those one-sided conversations back into the workplace, which I think will necessitate that we space people out further, which is good for COVID as well. But I think that it's going to be a whole new way of setting up offices to accommodate for video conferencing that we haven't had until now. And I think a very exciting opportunity, honestly.
And just by extension on what you were saying, Thomas, that there's a question coming from Stuart Cuppedge asking about the issues we're currently discussing and how they connect with equity, diversity, and inclusion, which I think the subject of kind of video meetings is part of that. But I wonder if you've had any client experiences where you've been addressing that alongside some of these other issues.
I don't think as such. I think what we talked about when we were last huddling on this was that opening the door to your home is a very different thing. And so I think we have to be, there's a whole HR component to this that we have to look into to make sure that when we hybrid these things, that we also allow people to close the door or put down the computer when they're off work. Was that where you were heading with the question?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of the types of spaces that we design, and designing those for inclusion, so that any person can use that space effectively, no matter who they are and their personal characteristics.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer to that specifically. I think we always design as much as we can so that any workstation or work environment can accommodate and has flexibility built into it, whether it's height adjustable or different types of seating, materials that are, I don't want to say neutral, but materials that are friendly to everyone. So a lot of the things that work in your home does not work in a workplace because it's too specific to your personal taste. So I think for sure those kind of conversations will have to continue on.
And what you're saying, Thomas, about the increase in these one-sided conversations and in video conferencing, acoustics has been important and a very key part of the office design. But do you think that's going to take a step up again as we have to think about different applications, really?
I think it's going to be huge, because also I think we will not be able to go to a meeting area every time our new, let's call it a phone or our virtual IM pings us. So like what Karen said, this setup here works, right? We have the technology to do what we're doing right now. That works fluently. But when it becomes, if it becomes 80% of your day, do we have the setup for that? Or do we need that setup at each station? And is there even a thing such as a workstation for this kind of work? Are we talking like an always on device with our coworkers that you just, you just look to your right and there they all are working on their things? I'm not on the technology side, but I'm very excited to see what comes out of this. This is channels like with some of the like a Snapchat or one of those things that we had that sort of always you know, it's always, conversation is always going, and you just plug in and out as needed. Big potential there.
If I could just jump in on what you said, Russell, on acoustics and noise, I mean, what we've seen in our data from measuring offices is that it's consistently been a challenge. Even in the best workplaces, usually there are some challenges with noise levels, and yeah, based on everything that Thomas has said, certainly it's gonna be a bigger challenge also going forward. Now we've certainly seen in our data that you know, naturally the proportion of people who did video conferencing previously is you know, a fraction of the proportion of the people video conferencing now. Now you probably didn't need our data to show that, but what we've also seen in our data previously is that offices haven't been outstanding in supporting video conferences. So across those nearly 800,000 respondents, we've had a satisfaction score of about 65% or a score of about 65% saying that video conferencing is supported in the office. And now people have actually become used to it being really well supported at home. So across the home working data, we see a near 90% support for video conferencing. So not only has video conferencing increased, but also I think the expectation for it to be smooth and seamless has also increased. So certainly going to be a challenge for offices going forward.
There's a really interesting question that's come in from Miles on the chat and saying, what's your main argument or points to put forward if an organisation has two options: rationalise their footprint or repurpose the excess space? When an organisation is faced with that choice, what's the main argument for repurposing the space rather than rationalising it? Karen, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are there.
Well, I think that, again, it depends upon the organization, right? And I think that there would be surveys and a lot of research that would need to go into that with each individual organization to figure out what their goals are and what their priorities are, and then make the decision on which way they go.
Yeah, if I may, I also think, like, so we're in a very difficult time right now. Not necessarily the best time to be designing for. Like, just be wary that, or hopeful that soon you will be needing your office for hiring. And so, you know, there may be an office park 2 towns over that you could move to, but is that going to benefit your business in 5 years when you're looking to hire and retain talent? So I think it's a discussion we need to keep going, but let's not be so scared of the future. I think let's design with a positive outlook.
We've definitely seen a reluctance from many of the clients we're working with to kind of come up with knee-jerk reactions. I think a lot of people are recognizing that we are in a highly unusual situation. Everyone has coped amazingly well, but there isn't really a normal outside situation, so we've had to cope. Now, what that looks like in 3, 6, 9 months time, when maybe there's some kind of vaccine, when the students have gone back to school, when our partners are now back out at work and we're not kind of sharing the kitchen table with them, that's going to be quite a different environment for us to all work with. I was just interested in if I can just segue into a question from Samantha Sternick, who's asking about any data regarding the performance of employees working from home who also have caregiving requirements during this pandemic. I guess that could be extended in a number of different directions, but kids is the thing that immediately springs to mind for me. But do you have any data around that, Peggie?
Yeah, we do actually. So in our survey, we do ask a question about who, when you're working from home, who typically has, who typically is present, and you have then options of saying no one is around, or you have the option of saying you have children and partner or other family members, and interestingly, well, out of those different options, the respondents who have reported the best experience is certainly those who do not have anyone around, so those who are alone at home. But there's actually not that big of a difference between if you've had children around or not. And it's something that we are intending to look into in more detail when we have more more data, because we want to do a bit more analysis on whether there's different combinations. So for example, if you do have children around, but you also have a partner who's sharing the responsibility, does that have an impact? Or alternatively, perhaps cut that with age, and see whether those who are younger with children, who most likely have children who are perhaps of younger age, whether that has a bigger impact on the experience. So to be honest, I think the background question that we've asked that actually has shown to have the biggest bearing, or being the strongest predictor on of your experience, is actually quite naturally perhaps the type of setting that you're working from when you're working from home. So we see a massive difference between those who have access to a separate room that is actually dedicated for working, versus the other extreme. So those employees who are working from a space that is not actually at all designed for or meant to be for working. So you're working by your dining table or in the kitchen or so forth. So and on that, I mean, we see huge differences in whether you perceive that the environment enables you to work productively, and to the point that Thomas, you touched upon earlier on. That actually has quite a big bearing also on whether you perceive that you can maintain a healthy work-life balance. So when you do have that office that you go into and then you work there, and when you're done for the day, you leave and close the door, it seems to be a lot easier to switch off compared to what it is for those employees who are working from the same spaces, where they then also continue their evening and have dinner and so forth. It's so much easier to then grab that laptop and do a little bit more in the evening as well. And so that's actually the thing that we've seen has the strongest implication on your experience.
That's a great point to bring in, the whole subject of the work-life balance. I think that's probably something that we've all experienced in the last 3 to 4 months. Potential pressure, negative pressure in kind of keeping that separation between, you know, closing the door at the end of the day or closing your laptop. Karen, have you seen any corporations or organizations implementing some kind of policies around that to help guide their teams?
Yeah, I think that's going to be very important in the future, is that change management, right? And coming up with new guidelines and policies for what the right work from home solution is. So my husband, for instance, pre-COVID, they were not allowed to work from home. They didn't think it was possible. He couldn't even get into his email when he left the office. Now they're working fully virtual and have not returned to work. And so that has really had the company sit down and start to think, okay, what are we going to do moving forward now that the team has proven they can be successful virtually and working from home. So they're coming up with new guidelines and policies moving forward when the office, you know, returns to work in whatever form that is, to where you can choose, you know, how many days a week you're working from home. And I think it's, as long as the policies are set up appropriately and there's guidelines, and then that is reinforced with education to the entire team and the company, I think it'll be, you know, very successful. So I think a lot of companies are going to reevaluate what their policies were and come up with new policies and guidelines moving forward.
I do think, though, that it will require, I mean, it kind of hinges on everyone else to be, you know, to manage your day in the sense, and it's not easy necessarily, as mentioned, especially for those who work in the same spaces as where they live. So I think leadership is going to have to play a big role there, where you kind of perhaps lead by example and really, you know, make sure that employees understand that they should not, it's not desired for them to work all day every day and you know, work more hours just because they are saving on that commute. So I think that's where, yeah, leadership will definitely come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, like, you know, feeling like you were both a bad parent and a bad coworker these last 6 months, right? Because you're trying to do both at the same time. And I think, so one way that we could maybe hope that in the future this would work better is if we have a more fluid work-life balance. Like, so, there's a lot of talk about everyone moving out of the cities, but if you're home and your kid's school and your workplace are in the city, well, there's actually a potential there for a very fluid workday where you somewhat seamlessly move between these geographic locations, but maintaining some kind of eye on the, or ear on the workflow. And I think that's really exciting. I think that's how that could be a very productive everyday life that is very rewarding at the same time. I've never been a big fan of commuting. Commuting once a week sounds better than commuting every day, but I think these, again, is a huge opportunity to rethink how we merge or not merge work and home.
An interesting.
And Thomas, I think that, yeah, I was going to say, I think that could really enhance well-being, right? So if you're able to have more control over that, right, and choosing, where you're working that day, whether it's at home or in the office. Right now, I have to work at home. I have no choice. So I think there's a mindset that goes around that versus if I was supposed to be in the office right now. So when we get past COVID and people do have choice, I think it's going to enhance well-being if people have the ability to really set their day or their week based on not only, their work life, but also their personal life. So I think that's going to be huge for mental health and just well-being in the future.
Yeah, I'm sitting right now in a beautiful office near Times Square. It's, I think it's amazing. I got all the energy of the city, but I can also say, right, the task this afternoon is to do, a sketch of something. I think I'm going to do that at home because I also want to listen to my kid's school video conferencing that he's doing, something like that, right?
You mentioned, I think, Thomas, when we were catching up before this, about we're about to enter an interesting dynamic where, obviously, depending on where in the world you are and what the virus situation is, we're going to have kids going back to school, and that's going to put a whole new dynamic into this. Do you think that's going to change the whole balance of office and home and where people work?
For sure. I think that our kids are such a big part of our life, obviously. And this whole thing, so right now, I know a lot of us imagined how this COVID lockdown would go. I was going to get into making fancy breakfast. That never happened. And it's not going to happen when my kid goes back to school either, because now I have to drop him off. And then I go back home, I guess, or I think that, thinking through what does this whole day look like, and do I actually know, at 7:30 in the morning, all the tasks that I will be doing that day, and can I plan for them physically, or I need to be at that space at 2 and that space at 5, or would I want some kind of space like the office where I go in and that's where I collect the day's work task, and then I go to the location that supports that the best.
Just segueing off your point there, Thomas, I love the analogy you used yesterday as to the village. Could you just expand on that a little bit?
So one of the things when we first started doing open offices was it was about flat hierarchy, for one, which I think a lot of people forget, that this wasn't about squeezing as many people in as possible. It was about giving everyone access to each other. But it was also that we wanted the office to feel like a village where you go to the area that suits your task best. So if I'm planning a birthday party, I don't book a conference room. I find a restaurant table. If I'm talking to some friends, we go and talk over coffee. We don't necessarily sit in a phone booth. So I think if we can bring that into the office, we have people up on their feet, we have them walking around, we have them sort of taking care of themselves in a way where they're thinking, I don't have to be locked to this desk. Right now, I would be much happier sitting over there with a gorgeous view of Times Square, and I'm going to make an espresso and I'm going to nail this task because I'm going to be in my best possible setting. But you might need to encourage that a little bit. You might need to push those options on employees because we're so trained to be like, this is your school desk. You sit down, you do your tasks.
Great. I love the analogy. Just shifting the subject slightly, we're getting a few questions coming in around, I think what relates to what was touched on a couple of times earlier, but the importance of the culture of the organisation. We've got one question from Anthony Fonseca asking about how can we make sure that new entrants to the workforce, interns or new employees, don't lose out, particularly around the whole mentoring, reverse mentoring, important subject. And then also John Trocino's asking about the human experience within the digital space, which I think is related, not necessarily the same thing, but related, and how we can drive behaviours in that environment. Karen, have you got anything you can share around? I know we were talking yesterday about the importance of mentoring, weren't we?
Yeah, and I think that when we going virtual, right, and totally work from home, the mentoring needs to be more planned, whereas before it just happened organically when you were in the office, where you overheard something or you checked in on what they were working on. You were able to really sit there with, you know, the individual and really mentor and teach them. And I think that goes both ways, right? That's reverse mentorship as well, and the older generation learning from the younger generation. And so when we're in this hybrid moment, and even, you know, or totally virtual right now and then hybrid in the future, I know we're going to need to, our company, my team, the design team right now, we're looking into setting up a more defined mentorship program, and so that there is a way to continue that virtually. Now, it's not going to be mandated. It'll be something that people can join if they want to and volunteer to be a part of. But I think it's going to be important to put up policies like that and have those started in organizations if they weren't before, if it was just happening organically before. And something that we were talking about, Jesse and my team, she brought this up, having coffee roulette. So you put your name in the box and you get paired together and you have a 15-minute coffee, virtual or in person. Maybe you do that every other week. And that's a way to get to know people that you wouldn't even normally be working with. So I think they're, you know, looking at mentorship and ways to do it virtually is important now, and companies setting up policies and starting to have a structure around it is going to be important to have that human element in this virtual environment that we're in right now.
If I can jump in there and say, I would argue though that, I mean, the virtual environment is never going to be able to get quite there as we can in the physical, and that's just I think a mere fact. Certainly we're seeing that in the data. So feeling connected to your colleagues is one of the statements or the questions where we see biggest challenges. So about a third of the respondents do not feel connected to their colleagues, and to your point about bringing in new employees, for example. So I've just had this week a person join the team, and you know, my concerns are well, on one hand, how can we ensure that he gets all the induction and all the training that he needs, when exactly, as you said, you don't overhear people talk about things, so you don't kind of get you know, tacit knowledge, you can't get it from the air kind of thing. But also I'm thinking about how do we make sure that he gets the feeling of like what the Leesman team is about. Like we have a very vibrant and fun office or fun team where, you know, there's a lot of jokes going around and stuff like that. How is he going to ever experience that when currently everyone is located in different places? So it's you know, it certainly is, you know, we have had the pub quizzes, and we've had you know, the questionnaires of whose baby picture is it, where we have the entire company join in and we try to guess who is who. But again, it's never the same. It's unfortunate, it's never the same.
No, you're right. Nothing's ever going to replace the human connection that you have face to face. It's just not going to work. Thomas, sorry, go ahead.
No, but I think part of that is that we're using a tool right now that we are used to using for very serious purposes, you know, big meetings, client presentations, you know, this is a very serious, you know, and somewhat heavily structured setup. So we've done the happy hour, you have 20, 30 people on, that's great. But I think what I have found to be the most rewarding is the smaller setting, like so maybe a team, 2 or 3 people, and actually asking, how are you? And I think the responses have been, the response to how are you has been much more personal than it actually often was in the physical office. And I think there's a whole new level of empathy where we're like, this is scary times. Like yesterday I was worried of leaving my house, or tomorrow I'm not sure how I'm going to do this thing because I have all these steps ahead of me that I can't hold in my head, and I'm nervous about that progression of things. So I think, I'm hoping that we can be more, have more empathy with each other, because we're now opening up to the private side of ourselves a little bit. I'm not saying we should throw all the doors open, but I think there is inviting a little more of a full human experience into the workplace. I think it's a fantastic and great evolution.
It's definitely also opening opportunities for creativity. I love Karen's coffee roulette idea. I wasn't quite sure where she was going with that, whether that's the coffee you get or the creativity.
Well, it could be.
The creativity to overcome these challenges that that are thrown at us, but still find a way of actually having those interactions, having those, even if it isn't as good as it would be face to face physically, let's try our best to make it the best we can.
I was interested yesterday, Karen, what you were saying about the need for flexibility is something you've been hearing a lot. How far do you think that's going to go in the hybrid office? Is it going to be, if you look at the scale from pretty much nothing fixed, so you can move the whole thing, how far do you think flexibility is going to need to go to accommodate the needs?
I don't think it's all the way, from none to everything's flexible. I think there are some spaces that are prescribed and are more set. But I do think, in the open office, and we've been talking about this a lot, looking at the open office and looking at new furniture solutions, right, for the open office, and looking at the pinwheel layout, right, and that, nobody's facing each other, but post-vaccine, you could take that same furniture solution and refit it out, maybe in benching, or, replace a few components, and you can get more people in there. I think those areas are going to be important to be flexible, because I think there are so many question marks still, and that there are companies that are having to make decisions now that with real estate, and they have to keep moving with their project. So the project is being designed to work for today, but the project also needs to be designed so that it is flexible enough to work 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, depending upon what happens. We're looking at meeting spaces. I think, you're always going to need a traditional meeting style room, but I think there's new types of meeting spaces that we need to look to introduce that are more flexible. So I think there's a good balance. I don't think it's going to be everything is movable and nothing is attached, versus everything that's fixed in some places right now.
That's good.
I mean, you still have to deal with ergonomics. So like,
yeah.
I could say that we design an office where everyone is sitting in sofas, but after a couple of hours of typing or on a laptop,
Yeah.
you would not like that. So I think let's give everyone the right amount of options so that you can really be as comfortable as possible in your workday. And then let's also keep an eye on technology. So right now, like when we're working in BIM software or any kind of digital universe, we need big monitors and we need powerful computers. That is, 14-inch laptop is not ideal for that. But all of that is changing. I'm just looking around this meeting room. I have 3 monitors I could connect to and do this call on. And that, I think that's just gonna keep going. And eventually any room will be able to accommodate the technological side of it. But again,
Mm-hmm.
the human body has certain proportions, and we cannot sit on the floor all day and work.
Right, let's try explaining that to a teenager.
They actually can, but you know.
Just wrapping up the last 5 minutes of our call today. So thanks again, everyone who's joined us. Thanks again to our panelists. There's just a few questions on the chat, which I wondered we could try to get a few thoughts on. Got an interesting question here from Shona Adam asking about, will organisations be looking for different behaviours and I guess by extension different skill sets from their employees going forward, prioritising well-being, self-management, and is there a slightly different set of soft skills that we're going to have to develop ourselves to cope with this new hybrid workplace situation? What do you say to that, Peggie?
Yeah, it's a good question. Hadn't thought about it. I think yes, we do need to take our own, like have our own responsibility of taking care of ourselves. But I think it's also we do need organizations to encourage that, and you can't put all the responsibility on the employee. You also need to offer the guidance and the tools and help people, because not everyone is by nature very self-disciplined and naturally would look after their health and well-being. So I do think you can't push all the responsibility to employees. I think I'd like to see organizations taking more responsibility in that and focusing on well-being programs and policies as well.
You want the workplace to make you a better person when you leave. You want to come in and be a better person when you leave that day. And so it's organizations putting in place policies or providing amenities and the right tools to better their employees.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could even argue that one of the main points of being an employee is that it's your personal growth, not just for yourself, but for the employer. An employee that is constantly learning and is constantly getting better at what they do or acquiring new skills, that's the whole goal. So, and we should be helping with that. And if an employee has issues working from home and they don't know it yet, we should be advising on that and giving opportunities, not forcing or squeezing into boxes, I think.
Very good. Well, we've had some great insights today, some fantastic perspectives and ideas and very creative solutions, as well as maybe I think one of the most valuable things that I find in often these discussions is just the perspective of what other clients are thinking about, what other organizations are thinking about, because that's often might be what sparks off just a little solution that's going to help me in my situation, or you in your situation, of course. So we'd like to thank everyone who's joined us today. Again, thank our panelists. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thanks, Peggie. Thanks, Thomas. And thanks, Karen, for joining us. Certainly have appreciated your fascinating views and the data that Peggie was able to share with us as well. Our next panel episode is that Amanda's just put the link in the chat box, but you can see on the screen the next panel discussion is on the 17th of September. So we look forward to inviting you to join us then. You can register on our website and receive your personal invite to that. Otherwise, thanks again for joining us and have a fantastic rest of your day. Thanks and goodbye.